again, welcome to the Master Gardeners, Los Angeles County Garden in Place Workshops. My name is Roger Gray. I'm a Master Gardener volunteer with the Los Angeles County Cooperative Extension. We have 3 or 4 different presentations for you today, depending on how the time goes, on things that you can do with or in your garden space while we're all safer at home here in the COVID-19 emergency. This morning, we're going to start out, however, with something on the lighter side that we hope appeals to everybody. It certainly always makes me feel better, and that is Confessions of a Master Gardener. Master Gardener Judy Gomez is going to tell us about some of the things that she discovered in her Master Gardener course that were a bit of a revelation, and some of them are kind of interesting. Judy, are you ready to roll?
I'm so ready. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of you, or at least to see your names on the screen. This is the 3rd segment in the True Confessions of a New Master Gardener. So I've actually titled this one, Even More, True Confessions of a New Master Gardener. So let's see if I can share the screen. There we go. Everybody can see that? Great, here we go. So even more true confessions of a new master gardener. I was in the class of 2000, which just finished. So let's see, go to the next screen. We just finished in May, we graduated. We had 50 fantastic people. Some of you have heard this introduction before, probably because, like I said, this is the 3rd segment in the series. I just recently retired, and so I found this picture of my retirement cake that someone had made for me, and I think it's fantastic because they knew when I retired I was going to go out in the world and become a master gardener, and I was so lucky to be accepted and had such a good time. So learned a lot, but there are some things that I was shocked to learn. I thought I was a pretty good gardener, but I learned differently. So you see this cake, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but these are potatoes right over here. And today we're going to talk a little bit about potatoes. So what I didn't know is a potato is not a root. Are you kidding me? So this is my first little segment today. Actually, a potato is, whoops. Don't want to give away my grandkids. A potato is a stem. It's actually an underground modified stem because it transports food, water, and minerals, which is a property of a stem and not a root. So the whole class was shocked when we found out that potatoes are stems. Roots actually absorb water and minerals and transport them to the stems. And potatoes don't do this, so they are not roots, they are stems. So I might or might not have gone to the Idaho Potato Museum in Blackfoot, Idaho, because I am a huge potato nerd, and that is my very well-worn t-shirt from going there. If you're ever driving through Blackfoot, Idaho, I really recommend you go to the Potato Museum. It shows all the old kind of machinery that they used to use in harvesting potatoes. I thought it was really interesting. And I love to grow potatoes, and my granddaughters love to grow potatoes. I'm also a big advocate of making sure that children get involved in gardening, so I had to stick their picture up here too. So this is my potato patch. I planted potatoes in March, and this picture was taken in mid-June. All that netting in the back of this picture is keeping raccoons out of my garden, which I have a big problem with. So you actually harvest potatoes when they start to turn brown. So you always get happy when your potatoes look like they're dying. So I decided I would pull up one and show you this root stem thing. So this is actually a potato that I harvested. These are the potatoes that we harvested yesterday. See these nice ones here. So you can see that it's actually, there's other roots over here, and this is actually the swollen part of the stem. So botanists all know this. It really doesn't matter to me personally as long as I can eat them. It doesn't matter to me if they are stems or if they are roots. So This is what they looked like yesterday, ready, all dying. And then my granddaughters came over last night, and they call this their treasure hunt. So they actually just love to pick the potatoes. So at your next gathering, whenever that may be in this world, astound your friends by asking them if a potato is a root. A sweet potato is a root, but that is a story for another time. So we're going to end with a potato joke. Why do potatoes make good detectives? Because they keep their eyes peeled. Happy potatoing.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Judy. Thank you. I am amused, the interesting thing about the stem material turning itself into a potato is that you can continue to add soil to potatoes and bury the vine, and they will send out shoots to grow more potatoes. That's why a lot of the tall things are potatoes, right? And you know the word tuber. Yes, definitely. A potato is sometimes called a tuber, but it's made out of stem cells. So that's kind of a not stem cells, but cells that would be a stem on a potato, and it's just fascinating. I did not, though, know that about sweet potatoes. Cool.
Yes.
All right.
I see a question, Roger, from Cynthia. Yes, actually, the netting works to keep the raccoons out. I also put the netting on these like bamboo stakes, and then I roll up like screen material into rolls, like a tomato cage that has tiny little holes, and I put that on top, and I have to watch it every day, but because they will try to get in. But I've really had good luck with keeping raccoons out with that. You can find it at a yard sale. It's pretty expensive if you buy it somewhere in a store.
Excellent. And I noticed that Master Gardener Robin has commented in the chat that you can sometimes grow potatoes in a trash can, in the sense of a brand new trash can. You fill up the bottom with a little bit of soil and allow a little drainage, but then you slowly add soil as the potatoes are frantically growing towards the top. And when you're done, you have a trash can full of all of the potatoes that have grown out laterally from the stems as it's buried up. Or you can buy commercial versions that have slats that let you reveal the potatoes on the bottom. It's a fascinating food to grow. All right. Well, we've been talking since March, honestly, when we first started this particular set of workshops. We've been talking about things to do that you can grow in your garden, because the immediate reaction was, well, gosh, if I can't go out to the store quite as often, or if there is hoarding and shortages, maybe I want to supplement my food. And then it became, well, I'm at home and I've always wanted to have a garden. And so we've done a lot of that. And if you're like me, you've reached the point where you're looking at your backyard and saying, okay, I dug a hole in the middle of what used to be a weed patch that some people call the lawn, and I've grown food, but I want to do something else with it. And I'll make some space for growing food, but I like it to be a place I want to hang out, because I'm definitely going to be hanging out in it for a while, and have been for the last 4 months. So our next speaker is going to take us on a little side trip, a little bit away from the grow things to eat place, and a little bit more into the grow things because they make your space more comfortable, more interesting, and they do positive things for the home that you're remaining in to be safer. We have Master Gardener Uma coming up next. And Uma, are you ready for us?
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Uma Nicole. I'm Master Gardener out here in the LA area. I'm in most northern part of LA County, Antelope Valley, very, very far away. Most people forget about us. And so I'm in the desert, but I have shady areas in my garden. And a lot of times those are things that we stay away from because we don't want to grow there. Most plants need a good amount of sunshine to grow. And we don't think to make those areas beautiful. A lot of times we just put things in areas, maybe using storage for our hoses and things like that. But with a little bit of knowledge and a different perspective, we can do some things that are really fun in those areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, be an introduction to one of many future talks, hopefully, that will come about tips to create and maintain your shade garden, different kinds of shade garden. Some of the pitfalls, like I, this gardener, have fallen victim to in trying to beautify a space like that, and just some really interesting suggestions, plans, and questions. So with that, we'll get started, and here we go. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the beginning of our ideas on creating a base map. When we talk about a base map, this is going to be how we describe what's happening in our garden. You don't have to be the most talented person in the world to do a base map, but I'm going to try and get an idea of what's happening in the yard or the area that we're interested in planting. So this is the top-down view. When you look at the center of the base map, you'll see the property. That's with the double lines, the lines around the rectangle. And so we always want to know the orientation, so we want to place that on our map as well. And you'll see in this map that we have areas that not only talk about the size and measurements, roughly, they don't have to be exact, but we want to sketch this area, talk about the amount of shade that we're getting daily and seasonally possible. How we do that is we look at the areas in our yard, beginning of the day, midway through the day, and the end of the day, see how the sun is rising. What is the pattern of the sun rising, coming to its zenith or its highest point, and then setting? So in this example, we see that this area has this top-down view of this particular property has some very interesting areas. Full to part shade to the left, part sun just above that, full sun above that, and then over to the right, we see full sun, and then down at the bottom right, we see part sun. So this interesting dotted circle that we see around the base map is actually the path of the sun. That's the path of the sun annually. So when we think about what's happening in a yard, well, why would we care about that? Because the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, right? Duh. Well, that's not true every day of the year. It's only true for 2 days out of the year. So that's March 21st, and then at the end of the year later in November. And after that, there is the general area and arc that the sun is going to rise and set in. So we need to know that as well. Keeping that in mind, that's why the shade positioning changes in the yard. Not only does this change of the sun in a daily pattern create shadows, we also have structures, existing structures in our yard that are going to create shadows. So say our property creating shadow, the house property that we live in creating shadow. We came in with existing landscape, larger trees, smaller shrubs. If we have a pergola in our yard, also if the neighbors have larger existing trees or structures, they're going to cast shade into the yard as well. So we're going to take all these into consideration. Alrighty, and with that, and then just looking a little bit further, we're going to figure out our style when we talk about a shade garden. But before we jump into that, I want to say a few more things about the shade garden. So we want to think about evergreen trees. If we have those, they cast shade year-round. And we want to think about deciduous trees. Obviously, they don't, because the leaves are leaving on those plants. So if we can determine our weekly patterns and our daily patterns and our seasonal patterns of the shade in our yard, at the end of this presentation, there are some really cool websites that I have to. You're welcome to take a screenshot of that and refer to those after we landscaping students can kind of take care of those things for us. So another thing we want to think about when creating a shade garden is the drainage pattern. A lot of times with drainage patterns, we don't realize that the shade garden has to have a continuous amount of moisture, not soggy wet, a little bit more damp than a wrung out spot. And so in order to do that, we have to make sure our irrigation is good. We're going to figure out our style. There are aesthetics that appeal to us. Here are some ideas that would help getting the creative juices flowing. And how do we envision the outcome of this space? Is it going to be a therapeutic garden, sensory garden, or is it just something that we just like to hang out in and take a little bit of rest? One of the most important things we can do so that our shade garden isn't just boring and just a bunch of plants in the corner or throughout our yard with design aesthetics or to create pathways. And we can do that with plants. Japanese grass. That can be a border along gravel and walkway or along these paved stones. Scattered, or also in between the stones we see ground cover that goes, break it up and also make a meandering path, kind of path more. Bottom you see coleus, and it's a very nice plant also. A really cool thing that we can do is upcycling. We don't think about bringing used parts or previously owned things into our garden and aesthetic to make it nice. But it can look nice style is. You see here we have an informal cottage style to the left, maybe dragon wheel coming yard. And to the right here we have remnant animals. That will look nice if we want to have a garden. Right. So moving on, one of the most important things we can remember is to plant en masse. And when we say that, we mean large. A lot of times before we experience it, have a little plant here and plant there. And to move ourselves away from a more novice looking garden and to have something that is more like having a real impact. We want to plant large groupings of plants. And when we look at these pictures here, we see groupings of hostas, and in the first picture here, and there's a variance of texture, and also some of the plants are variegated as well. There's a visual texture there, the light green and the dark green on some of the plants, and then also just a smoothness to the leaves and the longness and different shapes. That sort of thing will create a lushness to your yard that you wouldn't get if you weren't using plants. A couple of things to note would also be you can darken the corners that are extremely dark by using neon fluorescent plants. So some hostas come in some very bright green and neon yellows, and other plants as well, astilbes, things like that. You can plant them, they love shade, you can argue die in shade. And most importantly, they give a pop to areas that would be dark. Here we are again looking at some ways to create plants astilbes, the plants I just talked about earlier on the left. You see planting them in a grouping. It has more of an impact on this plant environment throughout the garden. Our center photo is one groupings of hostas, and everybody uses hostas here in gardens. But there are hostas that tolerate partial shade and also partial sun. So in the future, I'll talk about a little bit more about what those terms mean, establishing our garden, but they have to do with the hours of sun that you see, and also conversely hours of shade. And so on the far right here, you see the coleus. Fuchsia is the scientific name of it. Coral bells, they come in a myriad of colors and they're very beautiful, and you can also have an impact here lime green and dark green, beautiful rust colors, and they stay that color year round. So they're very beautiful. And so some sites to assist us in our design process. Like I was saying, we calculate the path of the sun so we don't have to sit in the yard all day and sketch that and take an average. The first site is suncalc.org. You go there and you put in your physical address, and it will tell you where the sun is right now. So I think it's great. It's really cool. I'm being a math nerd. I really love that. Then also you have House and Better Homes and Gardens. California Native Plants is an idea of what plants in your area. Still unsure about that, you know, more than happy to help you with that. There's the helpline, email, reach out. We volunteer and staff that as well. And if you just like me better than, you know, option, my email address at the bottom. Some closing points that I'd like to make about this would be just some things, some takeaways to remember. You know, aside from looking at the shade and checking out the drainage, and we want to try and maintain a fertile planting area. Be sure to always mulch those areas. It cuts down on water usage, and then it also makes it so that it protects the plants from the elements. And so we can talk more about that next time. And don't be afraid to, you know, experiment and use containers, most importantly, when you're first starting a shade garden, because you can move those guys around. You know that plants don't have feet and they're kind of stuck with them, but when we use containers to start our shade gardens, we can play with them a little bit and see where they like to be, and then that can rule out plants that wouldn't necessarily grow in that area, and also give us a better understanding of what we can use in that area so that we don't find the resources. Having plants all over. Okay, so with that, thank you so much for listening and for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. The thing I'll point out to folks that the links that we're doing, generally we put them up on the Facebook page, which is public facing, so you should be able to read it without a Facebook account. Having said that, the other thing that we can try to do is take links like the last page there from Master Gardener Uma's presentation, or Judy Gomez's link that she was discussing. Pardon me. We should be able to possibly put some of those up in comments for the YouTube video of the workshop. The YouTube video for the workshop is usually up in a day or two. It depends on how busy and how crazy the days get, but usually within 2 or 3 days at the most. And then you can find them on the UC Master Gardener LA County YouTube page, and all of the ones that we've recorded are there, and so are the most recent ones, and we can put comments, as I say, and put some links in the comments for you. All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Uma. I have a couple of shady corners, and I just realized that you talked about coral bells. There's a California native variety called alum root sometimes, yeah. And we wound up, without paying any attention, putting them right out in the sunniest part of our native garden space because it said partial sun.
Right.
Absolutely a beautiful thing to put in the shade.
Right.
And they're quite lovely when they're in bloom, but they do not like the full sun, and it's kind of interesting that way. So, and I see the YouTube channel, by the way, has been popped up by Master Gardener Jeff Warner in the chat, but you can also find it by searching on Master Gardener LA County in YouTube. All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to move out of the shade and into the sunny orchard, because we're going to have a little chat about getting out into the fruit trees. If you have fruit trees, this is really important, useful information for you to help you understand how to take care of them in the summer, so that you'll have a more healthy tree all winter long, and then next spring, the rewards will be sublime. If you don't have fruit trees, I'm going to encourage it, because even in a pot, you can put a small fruit tree, and it just grows year after year after year. You don't have to keep replanting it. You just play with it every now and then, and it's a happy fruit tree if you do the right thing. But speaking of doing the right thing, we have our orchard team leader for the University of California Cooperative Extension, LA County Master Gardener Group, to tell us what we need to do to that fruit tree now so that it's going to be even better next year. Herb, are you with us?
Okay, well, good morning. This is one in a series of compact virtual orchard workshops. And today, in addition to summer pruning, we're going to focus on the fundamentals of fruit tree pruning. Sometimes viewed as confusing and intimidating, many gardeners avoid this very important skill for maintaining healthy and productive fruit trees. In reality, learning this skill is quite straightforward. There are only two major pruning cuts that are used by master pruners all over the world. We're going to spend a few minutes on slides, and then we're going to go down into the orchard and do some pruning. And by the end of our session, you'll definitely understand the two primary pruning cuts, how to use them, and what the results of each cut will be to maintain tree structure. Can we do this in 15 minutes? Well, all of the Nobel Prize winners give their lectures in a maximum of 10 minutes. So let's get started. Again, we're going to go through the major pruning fundamentals for the backyard orchard. This is different than a commercial orchard, which has all the trees as clones. And so when you go in, there may be 200, 500, or 1,000 trees, but they're all the same. And a pruner then does the same thing on the first tree as the last tree. But in a backyard or a community garden, especially in Southern California, there are all different kinds of trees. You may from an apple to a pear, to a peach, to a nectarine, to a fig. And so you have to know what the basic pruning fundamentals are, and you can do this very easily.
Hi folks, I'm Herb from the Los Angeles County Master Gardener Orchard Team. It's a July afternoon in 2020 in the year of the coronavirus, and I'm standing in a Los Angeles County backyard orchard in front of a large apricot tree. This is going to be another session in our series of fundamentals of fruit tree pruning. And today I'm going to go over the basic pruning cuts, what they're designed for and what applying them to your tree, and also go over some of the fundamentals of summer pruning, which is often misunderstood, also often not accomplished regularly, and it's a technique that adds considerably to the health and productivity of the backyard fruit tree.
Here are some of the basic components of a tree. This may seem very simple to you, but it's very important that we know what we're talking about. All of the fruit trees have a root structure, which is a supporting and a nutrient gathering structure of the tree. And it's a different tree than the upper portion, which is the fruit tree. All fruit trees, especially the deciduous ones that come from the northern climates, are composed of two trees, a rootstock tree and a scion, or a fruit-bearing tree. And the graft site is usually right down at the bottom. This is the trunk of the tree. This is an apically dominant, or a tree with a main trunk. Then there are scaffold branches that come out. And from the scaffold branches come what we call lateral branches. And the lateral branches are where you have the flowering and the fruit-bearing buds. Fruit is not born on the trunk or on the main structural branches, but only on the laterals. A heading cut is made to cut one of these laterals anywhere along its axial length. A thinning cut is used to remove a branch. You can see this branch is growing downward, and if there was any fruit on it, it would probably drop to the ground. So a thinning cut is used to remove aberrantly appearing branches. In the summer, the tree will grow a number of water sprouts. These are very tall, very rapidly growing structures that have no branches. The reason they're removed, and should be removed wherever they are in the tree, is that they shade out the naturally occurring fruiting branches, and the quality of the fruit deteriorates. The other thing you have to remove are what are called root suckers, because the roots tend to put out its own little tree instead of feeding the normal grafted tree. So root suckers have to be removed. This shows a tree in a wonderful backyard orchard. It's a community orchard in Jessup, where I've seen the most beautiful fruit beds, most beautiful vegetable beds than anywhere in the county. But their fruit trees never bear any fruit. And you can see they're all overgrown and shaded. Here's a large water sprout growing up here, and it's a tangle of branches. The tree looks very healthy, but it produces no fruit. This is a plum tree. Because these come from the northern climates, there is no fruit tree that's indigenous or native to North America, except for the pawpaw tree. So all of them come from the northern climates of southern Russia, northern China, Uzbekistan, the mountains of Iran. The apples come from Kazakhstan. And they go through very severe winters with snow and ice storms. So the tree produces many, many more branches than it needs because it's going to lose many of them in the winter. In addition, these trees grew up in an area where there are a lot of browsing animals like deer and elk that eat all the young shoots. But when you move a tree like this into Southern California and there's none of those environmental hazards, the branches are overabundant. And pruning is a way for us to restore the normal ecology for these trees. So once this tree is pruned, this is what it looks like. It has some major scaffold branches and the lateral branches, and the little fruit-bearing twigs are now very well exposed to the sun, and this became a very productive tree. The main tool you use is the hand pruners. Sap accumulates on the blades, and it makes it very difficult to prune and very dangerous for the tree because you introduce a lot of microorganisms, and they should all be kept clean and sharp. And in another session, we'll go over the proper selection, the proper maintenance, sharpening, and cleaning of orchard tools. This is a pruning guide that you'll be able to have as a download. We have it on little index cards, and it's a guide used by the Master Gardener orchard teams. And it has a pruning sequence, which is a methodical approach for the pruning teams. It starts with what I call generic pruning, meaning that you can go into an orchard with multiple varieties of trees and begin pruning right off the bat. And by the time you're finished, you've done about 80% of the pruning for that orchard. What you do is do things that are necessitated by all different varieties of fruit trees. You remove the suckers from the root, the water sprouts, broken shoots or branches, ones that are pointing downward towards the ground, ones that have evidence of disease with a canker or oozing. Once you've done that, you can remove branches that are rubbing, and ones that are crowded, and ones that are very twiggy growth that obviously can't maintain fruit. This should be obvious to all of you who have a garden to find these different structures. So this is something that's very easily accomplished if you know the basic pruning cuts. And once you've completed that, you've certainly done about 80% of the pruning that an orchard would require.
We'll begin by examining one of the branches and shoots in more detail to see what kind of story it tells about the tree's growth and what we might be able to do to improve the productivity.
This is known as a thinning cut, and it's used to remove a branch that's damaged or diseased or growing in an awkward position or rubbing on another branch. And this is a thinning cut. It's done with the loppers because it's kind of thick. And you make the cut right next to what's called the bark branch collar. That's a donut-shaped swelling at the beginning of every branch, every twig, and every shoot. And it has enough hormones to heal the cut very rapidly. Anywhere else, the branch or twig or shoot will die back until it reaches the bark branch collar. This shows a completed cut with the little donut-shaped bark branch collar intact. This shows it from another vantage point. That is a proper way to do a thinning cut.
Now I'm going to make what's called a thinning cut. A thinning cut is done to remove a branch or shoot that is growing in a poor direction. This shoot is growing towards the center of the tree where it's not going to get much sunlight, and consequently I would like to remove it. So I go to the base of the shoot where there's always a little collar. It's called the bark branch collar, right over in here. And I want to make the cut right outside of that little collar, because that little collar is where the tree can heal the pruning cut best. So I position my pruners with the blade right against the little collar, and I make a nice sharp cut. Now the healing will take place from this little collar, and what it will do in a few days, it'll secrete a waxy coating over this pruning cut, which will protect it from any insects or microorganisms from colonizing it. And then over a period of time, it'll heal over very nicely. So that's the way one makes a thinning cut, to remove a branch or shoot so that it doesn't regrow in the same area.
This shows a thinning cut done with a pruning saw. These are specialized saws that have very deep gullet, and it has a cutting tooth and a raking tooth, so that you can make a nice kerf and cut through this very moist and springy wood. And you always start by making an undercut, and then you cut down to it. And the reason is, as the branch gets separated from the tree, its weight tends to pull it down. And if you can't hold it exactly in position, which is extremely difficult, if you hold it too hard, you're pinching the saw. If you let it drop too low, it will tear off a piece of the bark right down below, and that's very bad. You can also do a larger branch in 3 cuts. You can make your first cut going down. Notice this is the bark branch collar. And then you could do your 2 other cuts, your undercut and your through cut, and it just leaves a little stub. And you can continue that cut down without fear of tearing off any of the bark. If you don't make the cut right at the bark branch collar and leave a stump, it'll die back to the bark branch collar, whether it's long or short, because there's no healing power in the tree in the axial part of these shoots or branches. And this is satisfactory, but it's a much weaker sort of healing, and it leaves a dead piece of wood that's possibly colonized by microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, or insects. If you injure the bark branch collar, the tree can't heal over that pruning cut. So this is a plug of dead wood that the tree has created to protect itself, which is okay. It's called secondary healing. It's like a cut that heals without proper stitching. On the other hand, if you leave the bark branch collar intact, this is a normal and beautifully healed cut. So keep that in mind. Now, here's how to perform a heading cut. This is the second of the 2 most important pruning cuts.
Here we can see a shoot that clearly is transitioning from last year's growth to the little knuckle to this year's growth. Now, if I'm going to make a heading cut, which is a cut made anywhere along the length of a shoot, the direction of the bud, the direction that the bud is pointing, will govern where the next shoot will grow. So if I were to make a cut here, the next shoot will be growing down towards the ground. That wouldn't be very good. If I were to make the next cut over here, the shoot will be growing out into nice sunny air, and that would be a good cut. If I were to make the pruning cut here, in front of this bud, the shoot will be growing towards me in an awkward direction. So where you make the pruning cut is very, very important. So I'll make a pruning cut right here, about 1/4 inch above the bud. Now you're seeing the cut that I just made. It's 1/4 inch above the bud, and it's slanting at a 45-degree angle, pointing in the direction that the bud is going. And that will encourage the new shoot that grows from this pruning cut to grow out towards me in a slightly upward direction. The distance of the cut from the bud permits a little area of the shoot to heal, and it'll heal over rather quickly, and it'll prevent the bud from drying out and dying. And that's the proper way of making a heading cut, and the proper position of the cut relative to the direction that the bud is pointing.
Now you know the two basic pruning cuts and how to do them and what you can expect from the cut. There are several different configurations of trees. Apples and pears grow with a central leader with the scaffold branches coming off. If you look at it from above, it looks like the axle and the spokes of a wagon wheel. And that's the way apple trees grow best, in this pyramidal fashion. This is a little apple orchard in a farm where I worked, and this configuration is maintained throughout the life of the tree. This shows an older apple and pear tree. It shows how you still have the same scaffold branches. They never change. And from that are growing the laterals, and off the laterals are all these little shoots that grow every year and will carry the apples. Now, some of you may think, whoa, that really looks skeletonized. How can that have any fruit? Well, if you look at that tree in summer, it's filled with fruit. That's what you get from proper pruning and leaving a big space for sunlight to cause the buds to flower and the fruit to form and ripen properly. Now, the maintenance pruning in the summer is removing the water sprouts. This shows a very nice example of the rootstock. This is the graft union, and this is the scion, or the fruit-bearing part of the tree. And the rootstock is trying to make its own tree, pushing up these suckers. And here is a citrus tree with the suckers growing up, and they're usually a different leaf pattern. If those of you who have citrus recognize this is trifoliate, which is the rootstock that's very resistant and works very well in our area. Here is a peach tree with a very large sucker. Here's the way they look. So that's the first step in maintenance pruning, is getting rid of these. In the summer, you do that after the tree is cropped, getting rid of the suckers and the water sprouts. This shows a sucker from an Asian pear, and if they're left to grow, this is the tree and this is the sucker. They grow huge and they can take over the tree. And very often when master gardeners are called by a homeowner and saying, well, this tree looked good, but it kind of died back, but then it came back to life, and it's a beautiful tree now, but we never get any fruit. And that's because the scion has been completely bearing rootstock. All right, Roger, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we have some time for questions, and also I can mention some of the basic objectives of pruning to control the tree height and fill the available space. Most orchardists say any light that hits the orchard floor is wasted energy. The pruning also provides us, and the branch angles are kept so that they're very strong. That's about 45 to 60 degrees. If the branch angles are very narrow, those are the ones that break. Counterintuitive. The ones that are like that are the strongest. So we ensure good light penetration, and we balance vegetative and fruiting wood. All right, Roger, I'll take any questions you guys have. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I've been doing. We all actually have several questions from the chat that we'll get up there. Master Gardeners, if you'd be willing to scroll through for those. I'm going to cheat, though, jump to the front of the line. I got one for you. Apple trees, still full of fruit, not quite ready, even though our apples are almost all done by mid-August. Is there any downside or any upside to going after those water sprouts right now while there's fruit on the tree?
No, the tree has excellent healing potential. And since it's midsummer, when it has a lot of growth hormones active, pruning cuts will heal very rapidly. And so summer pruning is very important, and the trees do very well. And what the advantage is, once you remove those water sprouts, the new next year's buds will begin to get sunlight. And when sunlight hits the buds that are on the top surface of the branches, it turns them into flower buds rather than vegetative buds. So the more sunlight you can get in the tree now will give you a better harvest next year.
All right, I'm going to get my clippers out of the drawer and leave you guys to finish up. I'll see you out in the backyard. Joan Borgman over there has, I believe, a question from the chat for us. What's up, Joan? What have you got?
I was going to actually go from the bottom up. There's a general question that says, did you say that all current year's water sprouts should be removed? Herb, all of
Yes,
the current year's water sprouts should be removed.
absolutely. Whenever you see them growing, you remove them because they bear no fruit. Sometimes they bear little fruit that's very poor quality, but they're shading the real flower buds. Now remember that most of these trees are members of the Rosa family. So basically they grow a shoot one year and they have fruit on that shoot, or they have fruit the next year. So if you have a big long 3-foot shoot on a apricot or a peach or a nectarine tree and it has fruit, it will never fruit again. So once a branch or shoot fruits, that's it for the life of the tree. And that's why you need to prune those already flowering and fruiting branches out, as well as the water sprouts, because you need to continue to get fresh and new fruiting wood. So anytime you see the sucker or water sprouts, that's a good time to prune it.
Okay. Running back to the very beginning of the questions, I want to get one from Ariel that says, question for Herb. If I just planted the tree in the spring, should I top it off with heading cuts in September while it's still small?
The best thing to do with a tree that's freshly planted, first of all, when you plant it, usually in the winter, you couldn't plant them in spring as well, early spring, is to cut it down to knee height, because that will produce much stronger branches than leaving it the way it came out of the nursery. They don't want to prune it for you because they want to think you're getting a lot for your money. But they should all be, like in commercial orchards, pruned down to about knee height. And then the branches begin. And as they grow, if the main stem or the trunk grows 2 feet, you should cut it off there. Because once you cut it off, you stimulate all of these side branches that are going to bear the fruit. If you let it go straight up, which is a normal characteristic of these trees, because they usually grow in a forest and they want to get up into the light, but that's not necessary here in a Southern California garden. So basically, all through the summer, you should be pruning the tree back to encourage these other buds, which are dormant until you prune it, to form all of the lateral branches and form all the fruit-bearing shoots. So continued pruning every couple feet ensures that you have a very well-producing tree. I hope that answers it. But
I think it did. There's a variant on it that says, just to double check, these are cuts that can be done year round. And we've established that the pruning cuts are, but what about the others? Should they wait for the dormant season when the fruit is gone?
Well, the dormant season is used mostly for structural pruning. You remove all the branches that are broken. Some of them had a large weight of fruit and they broke. Some of them had gotten disease during the summer. That's when most of the insects are active and carrying disease to the trees. So the winter pruning is quite different than the summer pruning. And the summer pruning is quite different than a new tree. With a new tree, you're trying to develop structure in that first year. And basically, the buds that are on that tree when you buy it from the nursery are called determinate buds. They'll only grow a certain length and then stop. But if you cut it down, you free up what are called epicormic buds. And these buds will continue to grow throughout the warm weather. And so you get much stronger, larger limbs when you prune down the tree so that it can activate these epicormic buds. And that's a very important thing. When you plant a tree, you should review that in the Master Gardener Handbook or in Sunset, because most people just plant the tree the way it comes from the nursery, and the fruit then is almost out of reach from the very beginning. So pruning is an all year round, or you can divide it up into once during the summer season, once during the winter season, and maybe once during the spring season, and that's about it. It's not like tending a vegetable garden. You've got very discrete times when you can accomplish everything in one day's work.
Excellent. We have a couple of questions about espaliered trees, that is, the ones that have been trained to be flat. Pardon me. And the first question is basically, what are some resources that would help one deal with espaliered trees in particular? And then in a related question about a similar configuration, they're asking about planting it up against a cinder block wall that faces north. So it's quite shaded in the winter, but gets a reasonable amount of sun, direct sun, in the summertime.
Yes, yes. You've got to realize that the citrus trees produce their fruit and flowers and the most vigorous growth during the winter. So those are trees that can face north, and in Southern California at least, or can basically you want the citrus trees to have available sun in the winter. The deciduous trees, the apple, pear, plum, nectarine, they don't need any sun at all during the winter because they're going to be bare. They'd rather have no sun. So basically, those trees can be planted in areas where you have summer sun but no winter sun. To exfoliate them is when you really use your pruning techniques. What you're doing is you're favoring branches that grow from side to side, removing the ones that grow front and back. And there are ways of stimulating the buds that we'll do in another session. It's called notching. So you can make a bud grow out along the wall, and it's just a wonderful way of planting fruit trees in a small garden, by a fence, by a sidewalk median. Apples do best, pears do very well, citrus can be espaliered. Peaches and nectarines don't do very well, plums don't do very well. But for an apple orchard, growing it against a fence or a wall, as long as it's getting sun during the summer, is going to do beautifully. And there are resources in the Western Garden book and in the Master Gardener manual. You can get a lot of directions on how to get a tree espaliered, but it's very simple once you know the basic pruning cuts, which is the key. If you do those poorly, the tree won't do very well and will be prone to disease. But doing your thinning cuts properly and your heading cuts properly makes espalier a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now, you had mentioned in one of your handouts that, again, we'll get those posted in the Facebook group and link them wherever we can. There's a copy of a book, a green book called the Home Orchard Handbook or something like that. Is that a UC book? Is that available? I know it's on Amazon.
Yes, there is a UC book that's published by the Cooperative Extension called The Backyard Orchard. That's a superb manual. There's another book called Everyone Can Grow Fruit Trees, and it's published by the University of California as well. But the Backyard Orchard, or I think that's the full title, is published by UC Cooperative Extension, and it's really an excellent handbook for anybody who's growing fruit trees.
Excellent. I greatly appreciate it. Master Gardeners, do you have questions? Well, we've got Herb cornered here, something you meant to ask him at the last workshop that he gave to Master Gardeners and didn't, or do you see one I've missed on the chat? Yes, Joan.
Yes, hi. Well, someone has asked, if there is a very overgrown avocado tree that is so tall that fruit can't be picked, is there any way to radically cut it back once it is very well established and still get fruit going forward?
Yes, I visited several of the orchards I worked with in the central coast. Orchard trees that were 20 and 30 years old and very tall were cut down to about 10 feet. And they form side branches and they have excellent crops. So it can be done. To reduce an overgrown tree, it's best to do it in stages over a three-year period. So you want to remove about a third of the branches, pick the scaffold branches that you want to save, and begin shortening the others. But do it over a 3-year period so you don't shock the root system too radically. But all overgrown trees can be cautiously pruned down to a reasonable height when it's done in stages. And you want to look very carefully at the tree structure and see which branches you want to save. And the tree will respond by putting out many, many more new fruiting shoots. So a lot of avocados are really overgrown. A good variety is the holiday avocado, which is a UC cultivar that is a naturally occurring dwarf avocado, but it'll grow to 10 feet. The best thing to do is to try and keep them under control as they grow. So those of you who are starting new trees, just think of it. Most of these trees will grow to 40, 50 feet, but they can very easily be kept in a good, normal, easily maintained size. If you go into an orchard now, a commercial orchard, and one of the self-pick orchards, you'll see the trees are about 8, 10 feet tall. If you go into the same orchard 20 years from now, the trees will be exactly the same height and in the same configuration. And that's the beauty of it. In a commercial orchard, they realize that the pruning keeps the tree in its own space and a reasonable size through the entire life of the tree. So that's very reasonable to do. And many of the things that are done in commercial orchards, whether they be organically managed or conventionally managed, can be adapted for the backyard orchard. It just means you have to learn these techniques and start using them. And from what you know now, you can go into your orchard or your fruit trees this afternoon and make some cuts and try and get the tree to look like a nice commercial organic fruit tree.
Excellent. Thank you, Herb. I will tell you, and I was kind of making a joke, but I'm dead serious. I know where my pruners are, and I know which ones are sharp and already clean, and I'm out there as soon as we're off here. Although, speaking of getting off line, we have reached the top of the hour, and so it's time for us to wrap up and say goodbye to folks. Before we do, I want to let everybody know, Herb and I have been in discussions about doing an entire series on the fruit tree piece. So stand by, not only here on Garden in Place, but also a separate fruit tree specific place. As soon as I can get him to hold still in front of a camera, we'll get started with that, because it's a really useful skill, and it's a lovely way to grow food with a lot less work than zucchini, I tell you. Nobody ever ran from somebody coming with a basket of apples or oranges. They have run from zucchini. All right. Yes, I see Herbert recognizes that I'm right on that too. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. We will be back in August, believe it or not, and September. We are on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of the month. That would be August 4th and August 8th. I'm sorry, 18th, the 4th and the 18th, and September 1st and the 15th. And we'll get flyers out for that as well, but you might put them on your calendar. August 4th is our next up. There may be some special events in between now and then, so keep an eye on the Master Gardener Facebook pages and any of the mailing lists that you are subscribed to that helped you find us today. All right, Master Gardeners, if you'd stick around for a couple minutes, everybody else, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you in August. Bye now.